Robert Harrison's hands wouldn't stop shaking as he sat across from Dr. Matthews in that sterile white office. The smell of disinfectant filled his nostrils, making everything feel even more surreal. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as the doctor's words seemed to float around him without quite landing. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, aggressive, immediate treatment required. The words felt like punches, each one knocking the air out of his lungs a little more. His 8-year-old son Jamie sat in the waiting room just outside, flipping through a comic book, completely unaware that his entire world was about to change. Robert could see him through the glass window, his thin legs swinging back and forth from the chair that was too big for him. The boy had been complaining about feeling tired for weeks, about his legs hurting, about not wanting to play soccer anymore. Robert had thought it was just a phase, maybe growing pains. He had been so wrong. "Mr. Harrison, are you listening?" Dr. Matthews leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. She had done this too many times before, delivered this kind of news to too many parents. Robert forced himself to focus on her face, on the words coming out of her mouth. "We need to start chemotherapy within the next few days. The treatment will be intensive, probably lasting anywhere from 2 to 3 years if everything goes well." If everything goes well. Those words hung in the air like a threat. Robert's mind immediately jumped to the alternative, to the possibility that things might not go well at all. He had already lost his wife Catherine 2 years ago in that horrible car accident. The drunk driver had walked away with barely a scratch, while his beautiful, kind, vibrant wife had died on impact. And now this. "Now, Jamie, what are his chances?" Robert heard himself ask, his voice sounding strange and distant to his own ears. Dr. Matthews adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file in front of her. "With treatment, children with this type of leukemia have about a 70 to 85% chance of long-term survival. But I won't lie to you, Mr. Harrison. It's going to be hard. Very hard. On both of you. 70 to 85%. That meant there was a 15 to 30% chance that his son could die. That his Jamie, who still believed in the tooth fairy and insisted on wearing his lucky Superman socks every Friday, might not make it to his 9th birthday. The thought made Robert feel like he was drowning. The doctor continued talking about treatment protocols, about port installations, about nausea and hair loss and hospital stays. She mentioned support groups and social workers and financial counselors. That last word made Robert's stomach drop even further. Financial counselors. He knew what that meant. This was going to cost a fortune. Robert worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown. He made a decent living, enough to support himself and Jamie comfortably, enough to keep their small 3-bedroom house and take an occasional vacation. But he wasn't wealthy, and his insurance, while adequate for normal medical situations, had deductibles and co-pays and out-of-pocket maximums that he knew would add up quickly with something like this. When he finally walked out of that office with an armful of pamphlets and appointment cards, Jamie looked up at him with those big brown eyes that were so much like Catherine's. "Dad, what did the doctor say? Can I go back to school tomorrow?" Robert knelt down in front of his son and pulled him into a tight hug, breathing in the smell of his strawberry shampoo and little boy sweat. "We're going to have to take some time off from school, buddy. You're sick and we need to help you get better. Is it bad?" Jamie asked, his small voice muffled against Robert's shoulder. Robert pulled back and looked at his son's face, at the trust and innocence there. He couldn't fall apart, not now, not in front of Jamie. "It's serious," he said carefully. "But we're going to fight this together, okay? You and me. We're a team." The next few days passed in a blur of appointments and blood tests and scans. Robert took leave from work, using up the vacation days he had been saving for a summer trip to Disneyland. They met with oncologists and nurses and social workers. They toured the pediatric cancer ward where Jamie would be spending a lot of time. Robert tried to put on a brave face, tried to stay positive and strong for his son. But at night, alone in his room, he would cry into his pillow until his whole body ached. That's when he truly began to notice Maria Santos. She had been their housekeeper for about a year, coming 3 times a week to clean and do laundry and occasionally prepare meals. She was a quiet woman in her early 40s, originally from the Philippines, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. Robert had always appreciated her work, but he had never really paid much attention to her beyond the professional relationship they shared. But now, as his world fell apart, he started to see how much she truly cared. The first time he came home from the hospital with Jamie, exhausted and overwhelmed, he found that Maria had prepared a full meal and left it in the refrigerator with heating instructions written in her careful handwriting. There was chicken soup, Jamie's favorite, and fresh bread, and even a small chocolate cake with a note that said, "For brave boys who are fighting hard." Jamie's face lit up when he saw the cake, the first genuine smile Robert had seen from him in days. "Can I have some, Dad, please?" Robert felt a lump form in his throat as he nodded. Such a small gesture, but it meant everything in that moment. It meant someone else cared. It meant they weren't completely alone in this nightmare. As the weeks went by and the chemotherapy began, Maria's presence in their home became more and more important. She started coming 5 days a week instead of 3, refusing to accept extra pay. She would arrive early in the morning before Robert had to take Jamie to the hospital, and she would have breakfast ready and Jamie's favorite cartoons queued up on the television. She learned which foods Jamie could keep down when the nausea was bad, and she always made sure to have ginger ale and crackers on hand. Robert noticed how Jamie's face would brighten when Maria arrived. The boy had grown attached to her, maybe because she reminded him of the mother he had lost, or maybe just because she was so naturally warm and caring. Maria would sit with Jamie for hours, reading to him or playing quiet games when he was too tired to do much else. She never seemed bothered by the vomiting or the mood swings or the tears that came with the treatment. One day, about 6 weeks into the chemotherapy, Robert came downstairs to find Maria sitting on the floor of the living room with Jamie, helping him build an elaborate castle out of blocks. Jamie's hair had started falling out in clumps, and Robert had shaved the rest of it off that morning to make it less traumatic. The boy looked so small and fragile without his thick brown hair. "Look, Dad," Jamie called out, his voice weak but excited. "Maria and I are building a fortress. It has a moat and everything." Robert stood in the doorway watching them. Maria glanced up at him, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. She knew what he was going through. Somehow, she understood the fear and the exhaustion and the desperate hope that kept him going. Later that evening, after Jamie had fallen asleep on the couch mid-movie, Robert found Maria in the kitchen washing dishes. He picked up a towel to dry them, standing beside her in comfortable silence for a moment before speaking. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you've been doing. You didn't have to, but it means more than you know." Maria kept her eyes on the soapy water, her hands moving steadily through the routine task. "Jamie is a good boy," she said simply. "He deserves to be happy even when things are hard." Robert noticed for the first time the sadness in her eyes, the way her voice caught slightly when she talked about Jamie. "Do you have children?" he asked, realizing he had never thought to ask before. Maria's hands stilled for just a moment before continuing their work. "Yes, a son, Miguel. He is 12 years old. He lives in the Philippines with my mother." Robert felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Here he was, so consumed by his own problems, and he had never even asked this woman about her own life, her own family. "You must miss him terribly." "Every day," Maria said softly. "But I came here to work so I could give him a better life, so he could go to good school, have opportunities I never had. It is hard to be apart, but it is worth it for his future." Robert thought about what it must be like for her, thousands of miles away from her own child, caring for someone else's son, while her own grew up without her. The sacrifice seemed unbearable. "How long has it been since you've seen him?" 3 years, Maria said, and Robert could hear the weight of those years in her voice. "I am saving money to bring him here to America. Maybe next year if everything works out." They finished the dishes in silence, but something had shifted between them. Robert saw Maria differently now, not just as the woman who cleaned his house, but as another parent. Another person fighting her own battles while carrying her own heartbreak. The medical bills started arriving in earnest about 2 months into treatment. Robert would open his mailbox each day with a sense of dread, pulling out envelope after envelope with amounts that made his head spin. $4,000 for one hospital stay, $1,500 for a single dose of medication, $800 for lab work. The numbers climbed, and his savings account balance dropped accordingly. He started selling things. Catherine's jewelry went first, the pieces he had given her over the years. Each sale felt like losing her all over again, but Jamie needed the money more than Robert needed the memories. He put the nice television up for sale, the expensive camera he had bought to document Jamie's childhood, the golf clubs he never used anymore anyway. Maria noticed, of course. She saw the empty spaces in the house, the missing items, the stress etched deeper into Robert's face with each passing week. She found him one night sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and bank statements, his head in his hands. He didn't even hear her approach until she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Robert looked up, and he couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered. "I don't know if I have enough." Maria didn't say anything. She just squeezed his shoulder and quietly left the room. But Robert could see the worry in her eyes, the way she looked at Jamie with even more tenderness the next day, as if she too feared what might happen if the money ran out before the treatment was finished. Maria's expression softened, and she reached out to pat his arm. "You are a good man, but I am fine. You should focus on Jamie. That is what matters most right now." The next morning, Maria left the house early, telling Robert she had some errands to run and would be back by lunch. Robert was too preoccupied with his own worries to think much about it. He had received an email from the Boston clinic asking for confirmation about their participation in the trial, and he knew he couldn't put off his response much longer. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his laptop screen and trying to compose a message explaining that they wouldn't be able to participate due to financial constraints, when he heard Maria's car pull into the driveway. She came through the front door carrying her purse and walked straight to where Robert sat. Without saying a word, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She placed it on the table in front of Robert, her hand trembling slightly. Inside was a check made out to him for $47,000. Robert stared at it, not comprehending what he was seeing. "Maria, what is this? Where did this come from?" "It is my savings," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears that had started flowing down her cheeks. "I have been saving for 3 years to bring my son Miguel here to America. Every dollar I could spare I put away. This is everything I have." Robert felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "No," he said immediately, pushing the check back toward her. "No, Maria, I can't take this. This is for your son. This is for Miguel's future. Jamie needs it more," Maria said firmly, pushing the check back. "He is dying, Mr. Robert. My Miguel is safe and healthy with my mother. He can wait another few years, but Jamie cannot wait. If you do not get this treatment soon, he will not have any future at all." Robert stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Maria, this is 3 years of your life. 3 years of being away from your son. I cannot take this from you. I won't." "You are not taking it," Maria said, her voice fierce now. "I am giving it. There is a difference. I see Jamie every day. I see him getting weaker. I watch you break your heart trying to save him. I cannot just stand by and do nothing when I have the power to help." Robert's legs gave out and he sank back into his chair, staring at the check as if it might disappear if he blinked. $47,000. It wasn't the full amount he needed, but combined with what he had already scraped together, it brought him so much closer. It was the difference between impossible and maybe, just maybe, possible. "I'll pay you back," Robert said, his voice cracking. "Every single penny with interest. I swear to you, Maria, I'll find a way to pay you back even if it takes the rest of my life." Maria shook her head firmly, pulling out the chair across from him and sitting down. "No. You listen to me now, Mr. Robert. I have one condition for this money, and you must agree or I will not let you have it." Robert looked up at her, confused. "Anything. Whatever you want. You must take it as a gift, not as a loan," Maria said, her dark eyes intense and unwavering. "I know you. I have worked for you for over a year now. You are a good man, but you are stubborn. You will drown yourself in debt trying to pay me back, and then what good will you be to Jamie? He needs his father. Not a father who is working 3 jobs and never home because he is trying to repay money." "But this is your future," Robert protested, tears streaming down his face now. "This is Miguel's future. Your dream of bringing him here, I can't just take that from you. You are not taking anything, Maria insisted. I am choosing this. Do you understand? This is my choice. When I came to America, I left Miguel behind because I wanted to give him a better life. I wanted him to have opportunities, to go to good schools, to become something more than what I could be. But what kind of mother would I be if I could save a child's life and did not do it just because that child was not mine? She reached across the table and took Robert's hands in hers. Her hands were rough and calloused from years of hard work, but her grip was strong and steady. I think about my Miguel every day. I miss him so much sometimes I cannot breathe. But he is safe. He is healthy. He has his grandmother and his friends and his school. He can wait a little longer. Jamie cannot wait. And if I did nothing when I could have helped, how could I ever look at myself in the mirror again? How could I ever teach Miguel about kindness and sacrifice if I did not practice it myself? Robert broke down completely then, sobbing like he hadn't allowed himself to sob since Catherine died. All the fear and stress and exhaustion of the past 6 months poured out of him in great heaving waves. Maria came around the table and put her arms around him, letting him cry on her shoulder the way he had let Jamie cry on his so many times. I don't deserve this, Robert managed to say between sobs. I don't deserve your kindness. This is not about deserving, Maria said softly. This is about love. I love that boy upstairs like he is my own son, and I cannot watch him die when I have the power to help save him. Please, Mr. Robert, please let me do this. When Robert finally composed himself enough to speak, he looked Maria in the eyes and saw the absolute determination there. He knew she wouldn't back down, and deep in his heart he knew he couldn't refuse. Jamie's life depended on it. I don't know how to thank you, he whispered. You thank me by saving Jamie, Maria said simply. That is all the thanks I need. The next few days moved in a whirlwind of activity. With Maria's $47,000 added to his own funds, Robert now had $117,000. He was still short, but he was close enough that the hospital's financial aid office agreed to work with him. They found additional grants, negotiated payment plans, and connected him with a charity organization that agreed to cover a portion of the experimental treatment costs. On the 4th day after Maria gave him the check, Robert received the call he had been desperately hoping for. The clinic in Boston had approved Jamie for the trial. Between his savings, Maria's gift, the grants, and a structured payment plan for the remainder, they had enough to begin treatment. They would need to leave for Boston in 1 week. Robert told Jamie the news that evening, kneeling beside the couch where his son lay watching cartoons with barely any energy to laugh at the funny parts. We're going on a trip, buddy, to Boston. They have a special treatment there that's going to make you better. Jamie's eyes, which had been so dull and lifeless lately, flickered with something that looked almost like hope. Really? They can make me better? They can try, Robert said carefully, not wanting to promise something he couldn't guarantee. And we're going to fight as hard as we can. You and me, remember? We're a team. And Maria, too, Jamie said, looking past Robert to where Maria stood in the doorway. Maria is part of our team now. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. Yes, I am part of your team. And our team does not give up. The week before they left for Boston was filled with preparations. Robert had to arrange a leave of absence from work, this time an extended one that would likely cost him his job, though he tried not to think about that. He had to pack their belongings, arrange for someone to check on the house while they were gone, and handle a mountain of paperwork for the clinic. Maria helped with everything, as she always did. But Robert noticed something different about her now. She seemed lighter somehow, despite having given away her life savings. She smiled more easily, laughed at Jamie's weak jokes with genuine joy, and moved through the house with a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. One evening, as they were packing Jamie's things, Robert finally asked her about it. How are you really doing with all this? I know you said it was your choice, but giving up that money, giving up your dream of bringing Miguel here soon, it has to hurt. Maria paused in folding one of Jamie's shirts, a small Superman t-shirt that was now too big for his thin frame. You know what I realized? She said quietly. When I first came to America, I thought the only way to be a good mother to Miguel was to make money and send it home. I thought that was my purpose, my only value. But these past months with Jamie, I have learned something important. She sat down on the edge of Jamie's bed, still holding the little shirt. Being a good mother, being a good person, it is not just about money or what you can buy. It is about what you do when someone needs help. It is about choosing love over fear, generosity over selfishness. If I had kept my money and watched Jamie die, what would that teach Miguel? That money is more important than life? That we should only help people when it is convenient? Robert sat down beside her, listening intently. But your dreams for him? My dreams for him are that he grows up to be a good man, Maria interrupted gently. A kind man. A brave man who helps others when he can. And now I have a story to tell him. I can tell him about the time I had to make a hard choice, and I chose to save a life instead of saving money. I can tell him that some things are more important than plans and savings accounts. That is worth more than any amount of money I could have given him. She looked at Robert with a soft smile. And you know what? I talk to Miguel every week on video call. Last week, I told him what I did. I thought maybe he would be angry or sad that he has to wait longer to come to America. But do you know what he said? Robert shook his head, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He said he was proud of me, Maria continued, her voice thick with emotion. He said his friends at school think his mother is a hero because she is saving a boy's life. He said it made him want to be the kind of person who helps others too. My 12-year-old son, he understood what I did and why I did it. That made me realize I'm already giving him the most important thing, even from far away. I am teaching him what really matters. Robert put his arm around Maria's shoulders, and they sat there together in Jamie's room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the evidence of a childhood interrupted by illness. You are remarkable, Robert said simply, and I promise you I will do everything in my power to help you bring Miguel here. Not to pay you back, but because you're right. He deserves to be with a mother like you. The day before they left for Boston, something unexpected happened. Robert had mentioned their situation to a few people at work when arranging his leave, just explaining that they had finally secured funding for an experimental treatment. He hadn't gone into details about where the money came from or how desperate things had been. But his supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who had always been kind to him, apparently told others in the office. Robert came home that evening to find an envelope had been slipped under his door. Inside was a card signed by over 30 of his co-workers, along with a check for $8,000 that they had pooled together from the office. The card read, "For Jamie's recovery and your family's expenses in Boston. You've always been there for us. Now let us be there for you." Robert showed the card to Maria with tears in his eyes. I can't believe people would do this, Maria smiled knowingly. Kindness creates more kindness, she said. You are a good man who raised a sweet boy. People want to help because they see that goodness. And maybe, seeing what we did, it inspired them to be generous too. The morning they left for Boston, Maria insisted on driving them to the airport. Jamie was in a wheelchair now, too weak to walk far distances, but he was alert and excited about the airplane ride. He had never been on a plane before, and despite everything, the prospect of this new adventure brought some life back to his eyes. At the airport, as Robert checked their bags and got Jamie situated, Maria knelt down in front of the wheelchair to say goodbye. She had decided to stay behind to take care of the house and keep working, as Robert would need every penny he could get for their expenses in Boston. You are going to be so brave, she told Jamie, taking his small, thin hands in hers. And when you come back, you are going to be strong and healthy again. I know it. Will you be here when we get back? Jamie asked, his voice small and worried. Of course, Maria promised. This is my home too now. You and your father, you are my family. I will be right here waiting for you. Jamie threw his arms around her neck, and Maria held him close, breathing in the smell of him, memorizing the feel of his fragile body in her arms. Boston in late March was cold and gray, nothing like the mild weather they had left behind. Robert pushed Jamie's wheelchair through the sliding doors of Boston Children's Hospital, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The building was enormous, all glass and steel and bustling with doctors and nurses and families who wore the same exhausted, Desperate expressions he saw in his own mirror every morning. The first week was a blur of tests and consultations. Jamie had to undergo more scans, more blood draws, more examinations by specialists who poked and prodded while speaking in medical terms that Robert struggled to understand. They stayed in a small apartment near the hospital, a cramped one-bedroom place that the clinic helped arrange for families participating in the trial. Robert slept on the pull-out couch and spent his nights listening to Jamie breathe, terrified that each breath might be the last. The experimental treatment itself was unlike anything Jamie had experienced before. Instead of the harsh chemotherapy that had made him violently sick, this new therapy was more targeted. The doctors explained that it worked by helping Jamie's own immune system recognize and attack the cancer cells. The side effects were different too, less nausea but more fatigue, and strange aches in his bones that made the boy whimper in his sleep. Robert called Maria every single day, sometimes twice a day. She wanted to know everything, how Jamie was feeling, what the doctors said, whether he was eating, whether he smiled at all. And Robert needed to hear her voice, needed her calm reassurance that everything would be okay even when the doctors couldn't promise him anything. "He asked about you today," Robert told her during one call, about 2 weeks into the treatment. "He wanted to know if you were taking care of his stuffed animals properly." Maria's laugh came through the phone, warm and genuine. "You tell him I tuck them into bed every night and read them stories. And tell him I am counting the days until he comes home." "How are you doing?" Robert asked, because he worried about her too. Alone in that house, working and waiting. "I am good," Maria said, though Robert could hear the loneliness in her voice. "I talk to Miguel more now. He asks about Jamie all the time. He wants to know if his new friend is getting better." 3 weeks into treatment, something shifted. Jamie woke up one morning and asked for pancakes. It was the first time in months he had requested a specific food, the first time he had shown real appetite. Robert nearly cried as he made those pancakes in the tiny apartment kitchen, watching his son eat 3 whole bites before getting tired. The doctors noticed the change, too. Jamie's blood work started showing improvements, small at first, but consistent. The cancer markers were dropping. His white blood cell count was stabilizing. Dr. Chen, the lead oncologist on the trial, smiled when she delivered the news at the end of week 4. "I don't want to get ahead of ourselves," she said carefully, "but this is very encouraging. Jamie is responding exactly the way we hoped he would." Robert felt hope bloom in his chest for the first time in what felt like forever. He called Maria immediately, stepping out into the hospital corridor where the signal was better. When she answered and he told her the news, he heard her break down, crying on the other end of the line. "Thank God," she kept saying between sobs. Thank God, thank God. But the treatment was far from over. The protocol required 4 full months of intensive therapy, followed by months of monitoring and maintenance treatment back home. There were still hard days when Jamie spiked fevers and had to be admitted overnight for observation. Days when the treatment made him so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. Days when Robert wondered if they would actually make it through this. During those long, difficult days, Robert and Maria's phone calls became a lifeline for both of them. She told him about the small things happening at home, how the neighbor's cat kept trying to get into their house, how the roses in the front yard were starting to bloom. He told her about the small victories, how Jamie had walked 10 steps on his own, how he had laughed at a joke on TV, how his hair was starting to grow back in soft little patches. "You should be here," Robert said one night, after a particularly good day when Jamie had actually played a board game with another child in the treatment center. "You gave up so much for this. You should be here to see him getting better." "I am there," Maria said softly. "Every time you tell me about his progress, every time you describe his smile, I am there. And that is enough for me." But Robert didn't think it was enough. Late at night, after Jamie fell asleep, he started researching immigration lawyers. He looked into visa processes and sponsorship requirements. Maria had given him everything, and he was determined to find a way to give her something back, even if she had asked him not to. He found a lawyer who specialized in family reunification cases and set up a consultation. The lawyer explained the process. The forms that would need to be filed, the documentation required. It would take time, maybe a year or more, but it was possible. Robert could sponsor Miguel as his employee's dependent, especially given Maria's long-term employment with his family. Robert started the paperwork without telling Maria. He used some of the money his co-workers had donated, money he had been saving for their living expenses, and paid the initial legal fees. It felt right, using money that had been given out of kindness to create more kindness. 2 months into the treatment, Jamie hit a major milestone. His latest scans showed that the cancer was in remission. The tumors that had been growing in his bone marrow were gone. His blood counts were almost normal. Dr. Chen used the word that Robert had been afraid to even hope for: cured. Or at least the possibility of cure. "We need to complete the full treatment protocol," Dr. Chen cautioned. "And he'll need regular monitoring for years. Childhood leukemia can relapse, so we have to stay vigilant. But right now, today, your son shows no evidence of disease." Robert called Maria from the hospital room with Jamie sitting beside him, strong enough now to hold the phone himself. "Maria," the boy said, his voice clearer and stronger than it had been in months. "Maria, the doctor says the cancer is gone." Through the phone, they could hear Maria's joyful crying, could hear her saying prayers in Tagalog, could hear the pure relief and happiness in her voice. "I knew it," she kept saying. "I knew you would beat this, Jamie. I knew it." When they finally returned home 4 months after leaving, it was a sunny July afternoon. Maria was waiting at the airport holding a banner she had made that read, "Welcome home, Jamie," in bright, colorful letters. When Jamie saw her, he broke away from Robert and ran to her, actually ran, his legs carrying him across the terminal floor. Maria dropped the banner and caught him in her arms, spinning him around as they both laughed and cried. Robert stood back and watched, his own eyes blurring with tears. This woman, this incredible woman who had sacrificed her dreams for his son, who had given everything expecting nothing in return. The house looked exactly the same, but somehow different, brighter. Maria had cleaned everything until it sparkled. She had put fresh flowers in every room. She had stocked the refrigerator with all of Jamie's favorite foods. That night, she cooked a feast and they sat around the dining table like a real family, Jamie chattering excitedly about everything he wanted to do now that he was feeling better. Robert waited until after dinner, after Jamie had gone upstairs to play with the toys Maria had carefully preserved for him, before he told her what he had done. They were sitting in the living room, both exhausted from the emotion of the day, when Robert pulled out the folder of paperwork. "I need to show you something," he said, handing her the documents. "I know you told me not to pay you back, and I'm not. This isn't about the money. This is about doing what's right." Maria opened the folder, her brow furrowed in confusion. As she read through the immigration papers, the visa application for Miguel, the letter from Robert's lawyer, her hands started to tremble. "What is this?" she whispered. "I'm sponsoring Miguel to come to America," Robert said. "The lawyer says it might take a year, maybe a bit more, but it's already in process. You gave me my son's life, Maria. The least I can do is help you bring yours here." Maria stared at the papers, tears streaming down her face. "But the money, the lawyer fees, all of this costs. Some of it came from the fund my co-workers set up," Robert explained. "The rest I'm managing. I got my job back, actually. My boss called last week and said my position was waiting for me. And with Jamie in remission, I can work again. Really work. This is happening, Maria. Miguel is coming home to you." Maria couldn't speak. She just clutched the papers to her chest and sobbed, great heaving sobs of relief and joy and disbelief. Robert put his arm around her shoulders and let her cry, the same way she had let him cry all those months ago when she had given him that check. But the story didn't end there. The following week, a reporter from the local newspaper somehow heard about what had happened, about Maria's sacrifice and Jamie's recovery. She called Robert asking if she could write a story about their experience. Robert was hesitant at first, private by nature, but Maria encouraged him. "Maybe it will help someone else," she said. "Maybe another family will see that there is always hope, even when things seem impossible." The article ran on a Sunday, a full-page spread with photos of Jamie, Robert, and Maria together. The headline read, "The Gift of Life. How a housekeeper's sacrifice saved a dying boy. The reporter had captured everything: Maria's 3 years of saving, her decision to give it all away, Jamie's miraculous recovery, and Robert's efforts to reunite Maria with her son. What happened next shocked everyone. The article went viral online, shared thousands of times across social media. People were moved by Maria's selflessness, by her willingness to give up her dreams for a child who wasn't even hers. The comments poured in, people calling her a hero, an angel, an example of pure human goodness. But more than comments came in. Donations started arriving. First a few $100s, then thousands, then tens of thousands. A local businessman who had lost his own child to cancer donated $25,000 specifically for Miguel's education. A crowdfunding campaign that Robert hadn't even started was created by strangers who wanted to help restore what Maria had given away. Within 2 weeks, over $90,000 had been donated. It was more than Maria had given to save Jamie. It was enough to bring Miguel to America, to pay for his education, to give Maria and her son the future she had been working toward for so long. Maria couldn't believe it. She sat at Robert's kitchen table looking at the bank statements and the messages from strangers all over the country, completely overwhelmed. "I do not understand," she kept saying. "I did not do this for money. I did not do this to be famous." "I know," Robert said gently. "But people see goodness, Maria. They see pure, selfless love, and it inspires them. You didn't just save Jamie's life. You reminded everyone who heard your story that there's still kindness in the world, that people still care about each other. That's worth something." 6 months later, on a chilly February morning, Maria stood in the international arrivals terminal at the airport. Her hands shook as she held a sign with Miguel's name on it, though she knew she would recognize her son anywhere, even after 4 long years apart. When Miguel came through the doors, taller than she remembered, almost a teenager now, they ran to each other. The reunion was everything Maria had dreamed of and more. Miguel was crying, she was crying, and standing behind her, giving them space but there to support, were Robert and Jamie, who now had a full head of hair and rosy cheeks, who played soccer again and went to school and had almost no evidence that he had ever been sick at all. Jamie, who was alive because a woman he barely knew had loved him enough to sacrifice everything. Later, at the house that had become home to all of them, they celebrated with a dinner that Maria and Miguel cooked together. Recipes from the Philippines that filled the house with unfamiliar and wonderful smells. Robert watched his son laugh and play with Miguel, watched Maria's face radiate pure joy as she held her son close, and felt a peace he hadn't known since Catherine died. They had started as employer and employee, 2 people brought together by circumstance. But somewhere along the way, through sacrifice and hardship and the deepest kind of love, they had become something more. They had become family. Not the family Robert had planned, not the family Maria had imagined when she first came to America, but a family nonetheless. A family built on the simple truth that sometimes the greatest acts of love come from the most unexpected places, and that true family isn't about blood or obligation, but about the sacrifices we're willing to make for one another.